What is your hottest political take?
That trans people are a sign that God is real. Because in the Bible, if we're saying that the body is only a vessel, then trans people are our everyday reminder that the body is a vessel and that there is a greater world and universe spiritually out there that is bigger than our social concepts and norms that pretty much keeps us in prison.
You know, that is a very powerful statement. And for those who are anti-trans, I would just really ask you to sit and marinate on that concept. You know, we say all the time that, you know, the human body is just a vessel, and what truly matters is our soul and our consciousness, you know, inside. But then in the same breath, you all attempt to prosecute these people because you don't like how they present themselves, which, again, all of this stuff is based off of social constructs. So I just really want y'all to sit with that and think about that and just ponder on that powerful statement that person just made. Another thing that was actually interesting in transgender news is actually on May 17th, there was a group of transgender women who staged a topless demonstration in front of the Scottish Parliament. Now, this protest was in direct response to a recent UK Supreme Court ruling that defined sets strictly based on biological criteria, effectively excluding trans women from certain legal protections under the Equality Act of 2010. Now, the protesters' decision to go topless was both symbolic and strategic because in the UK, public toplessness laws actually differ between men and women. So by these trans women appearing topless, it challenges the legal system because if you arrest them, you are acknowledging them as women, which is highlighting the contradictions within that law. You know, I talked about some of the contradictions that are popping up in a bunch of these laws that these conservative groups are attempting to pass across the world, and it opens up a variety of issues because a lot of this stuff isn't as simple as, you know, what your biological makeup is. You know, I spoke about intersex people on a recent podcast and like how do we label them, you know, if they were born with both genitalia or if they were born with unrecognizable genitalia or some variation of their genitalia and their chromosomes, like what box do you put them in? Then, as we've talked about a bunch of different times with the bathroom bills, what do you do with that? You know, you have the whole situation where you could have someone who was assigned male at birth, they grow up and transition into a trans woman, and then you're uncomfortable with them being in the women's restroom. So then you ask them to be in the men's restroom. But then in the same breath, you have individuals who were born and assigned female at birth that then grow up and transition into trans men, and by your same definition, then they should be in the women's restroom, right? But then you're uncomfortable with that because they look like men, they look masculine. So then what do you do with them? And then furthermore, it brings up a bunch of the tragic shit that ends up happening. I talked about recently the mass presenting lesbian who went into a women's restroom. Security guard ran in there after her and was beating on the stall to try to bring her out because they felt that it was a trans person, and this person, you know, got harassed. Then recently, unfortunately, there was a young lady who's also a masculine cisgender lesbian who was getting ready to go into the women's restroom at a McDonald's, if I'm not mistaken. And there were two gentlemen outside who, same thing, felt that they were transgender and trying to go into the women's restroom. And they decided to, quote unquote, take the law into their own hands. And they violently attacked and beat up this woman and knocked her unconscious and, you know, put her in the hospital. And it was all because they made an assumption that this was a trans person. And that is the reason why we've said it 1,000 times before. And we're going to say it 1,000 times, again, until you all realize this and understand this. Trans rights are human rights. And it's always... It's the situation of right now. It's like, oh, hey, this comes down to trans people and this is what we're trying to do and we're trying to protect the children. But honestly, what this is actually going to end up doing and has been doing is this is actually putting a lot of women in harm, because now what we're starting to see with security guards and with these idiotic fucking men, they are harassing and attacking women that they don't find attractive or that they find to be too masculine, because they want to identify them with this transgender boogeyman that the media has told you is out, sneaking into the restrooms to try to get your kids. And now cisgender women are being affected. So once again, trans rights are human rights. And if you continue to allow this shit to happen with them, continue to see what is going to happen to the rest of us in this society, because they are testing things out on the transgender community, because they make up shit less than 2% of the population, and they're going to test some stuff with them. And as soon as they can figure out these plans of how they can control and manipulate and attack this vulnerable community, they're just going to then broaden their horizons and attack the rest of us. They're using transgender people as guinea pigs, and I need you all to wake up so we can fight together and fight for the rights of all Americans.
Sir?